Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Why You Should Consider HMIS Administrator Services. We are excited to hear from Pat Frey from the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley in Columbus, Georgia, and Dustin Taylor, their Ecovia Solutions HMIS admin. Just a reminder that your microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. Please submit questions at any time in the Q&A panel or through the chat panel, and we will address as many as we can during the last part of the webinar. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the time over to Pat and Desta to introduce themselves.
Hi. Hi. My name is, Pat's first, sorry. I'm already getting this messed up. I'm out of turn already. This is how our meetings usually go, so this is a really good example of it. But take it away, Pat.
Thanks, Dessa. I'm Pat Frey. As you can see, I'm Executive Director of Home for Good, which is a program of the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley. I've been in this current position for about 3 years now, having a previous life in outpatient case management in the medical field. And we've been working with Desta now for since November 1st as our HMIS administrator through Ecovia Solutions, and really excited to talk about the difference between having an on-site admin versus a remote one, and how it's affected us in a positive way.
Hi, I'm Dustin Taylor. I'm a HMIS administrator at Ecovia Solutions, and I have the pleasure of working with Pat and Columbus. So my background is I came from psychology. I work mainly with social science data. I started in mental health and fell into HMIS, which I'm really happy for because I cannot imagine doing anything else. And I'm very happy to be here and to talk to you about our experiences with working together. I've been with Ecovia for about 6 months now, but I have worked in data a lot longer, and really looking forward to continuing on in this field. Next slide.
Just a little bit of background. Home for Good, again, is a program of the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley. We were founded in 2011. And as you can see here, we're charged with implementing the city's 10-year plan and homelessness. Same thing as most of you are doing, wanting to make it, rare, brief, and one time.
So one of the things that we were going to talk to you about today is a couple of the challenges that Pat have had since that we've had working together. When we first started working together, as Pat said, we started working together in the beginning of November, so November 1st. Mm-hmm. And well, Pat, can you tell us a little bit about, do you remember our first call? And because I think that perfectly sums up our first call and how that went and what we ended up doing with the LSA. Do you remember that?
I have a short in memory, but I do remember that at the end of that call, my stomach was in knots, and it was very obvious how much I didn't know. But on the other side of that coin, I was thankful that I had someone who did know, who not only pointed out, well, this needs to be fixed and this needs to be done, but immediately gave me a solution. So it was not, it wasn't pointing out the challenges so much as how we were going to overcome them that I was able to sleep that night.
Yeah. And for those that have a little bit of background, like for November 1st when we first started, the first draft of the LSA was due at the beginning of November. Mm-hmm. So our first meeting was literally like, hi, I'm Desta. Let's start working on the LSA because we've got to get that thing menued up and get it going. So we were able to quickly go to a position where we started working together to where the LSA wasn't even menued up, to where she was able to run it and meet the requirement of the first draft, which was wonderful. And we just continued working together through this. And we have weekly check-ins. We talked along the way. I was able to run some queries on the data. One of the things that we do is admins, we work together as a group. So it's not just me, it is a group of us. And we meet, we talk about our experiences and other things that happen. So when we find things at work, we share it. And one of the things that we found was running queries to check for data cleanliness that was a little bit more robust than what we were doing. And we were able to do that and troubleshoot and help develop a plan ahead of time. And, you know, as Pat said, it really helped both of us sort of like, okay, this is what we're working on next. Now we're going to work on this, and getting to where we were able to submit in a timely manner.
Well, I think from our perspective, you know, it was the queries allowed us to drill down very, very quickly and precisely to the things we needed to fix, because just looking at the whole LSA as a whole was so daunting and overwhelming. If you're not the data scientist that works on this every day, it made it very pinpoint. Okay, you need to take a look at this. This needs to be evaluated, and we were able to not only make those the deadlines, but really, I think in the end, eventually after HUD made its many changes, that we were able to submit the best data that we possibly could have submitted for our community, and I. Without a doubt, I know had we not gone through the queries at all, that wouldn't have happened.
It was very wonderful, you know, as Pat said, that we were just able to work together on this. We were able to, because we talked weekly, we were able to set up these examples, troubleshoot for data quality, and this increased communication really helped us along the way. You know, it's never a question of us wondering if something needed to be done, or if, you know, like if we were worried that someone was struggling, because we were already in that constant communication. And, you know, Pat and I are very lucky that we are very comfortable with each other. So, you know, we joke, we're able to, you know, just talk to each other. And if I'm not sure if what Pat is asking me, or if I'm not sure of, you know, what we're communicating about, that we're not afraid to ask each other questions to clarify, to find these things out, which is a really good example of what you see in our first, like, this is our first main project that we tackled together, and we just sort of hit it running, which is really awesome. Yeah.
But I agree, Desta, and the thing that, you know, to have a person, when you said, you know, it's not just you as a TA or as an administrator, but you meet with and feed off of the other administrators, you know, having a team of people who this is what they do on a daily basis. This is their, you know, their livelihood. And I think someone said to me last week, data is what Desta eats, sleeps, and breathes. And so it allows me as an executive director to concentrate on other things when I know that she's got it covered and she's going to tell me. And I told her on conversation 1, listen, I know I don't know all of this, so I need you to tell me step 1, 2, 3, and I will follow your directions. You were the expert on this, I'm following your lead, and it has worked.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the things is that, you know, like, I don't expect Pat to know this, you know, and that's not Pat's role. That's my role. That's what I do. And it's my passion and my responsibility to make her understand and to give her the tools that she needs to set her up for success. Right? So another challenge that we've come across is monthly reports. And this is something that I think is very relatable for all individuals, because Pat, on one of our calls, was like, hey, you know, I've got reports that I run, and it's not really something that falls into the other the HUD reporting, but it's a separate thing. So we were able to talk it out, and we have set up a protocol. And we were able to set up a database for her that when she needs that data and how it's broken down, I'm able to go in and run it for her, or she can even go in and run it herself if she wanted to. But we've established a protocol that if she, to meet her needs for reporting, that when she wants this report done, she goes into the system and a ticket asks me, I run the report and send it, attach it in the ticket and send it to her, which satisfies security and safety needs for her, but it also gives her the data that she needs. And then we also are able to follow up on these calls where if she needs to, there's a question of how to manipulate something, or there's a question of how to get at information, that we talk about this on these calls. Pat, is there anything you want to add? Just jump on in.
Well,
you know how I am.
Right.
You know how I am. I'll just keep talking until somebody
Actually, what I was about to say just appeared in my little quote at the bottom there of that slide. Literally, it was, there's got to be a way to automate this. We shouldn't have to sit here for hours and hours every month on the same day every month doing the same thing. This seems like a waste of time. So this literally made it all possible to do what we needed to do, and it made it so much easier, and it was truly one of those things I had dreamed about for years.
So Pat, what was your process like before? Because that's something we never really talked about. It really just came to me like, oh, you need help with this data, let me get it for you. So how did it come about with you? Like, what was your process like before when you were getting the data? Did it take you a couple hours to get it?
Yes,
or?
It took 2 to 3 hours. And,
oh, wow.
Right. And then we found out at some point not too long ago that when one person stopped doing it and another person started doing it, they were looking at things, instead of talking big picture and drilling down, they were doing little picture and going up. So we were not comparing apples to apples anymore. So this, just so that we have, number one, it's pulled the same way every time. And because of your documentation, we have directions on how it's done, so that going forward, if someone else was to come behind us, they would know exactly what was done. Like I said, I come from a hospital setting and a healthcare setting, so I believe if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So having the tickets and that documentation is huge.
Yes, I really agree. That's one of the things that, Pat and I talk about too, is I try to document in a way that if needed, Pat, where someone can go back and see what I've done. That way she can see what's going on and users understand the processes and how I have made changes to the system. Right, and then Pat, do you want to talk a little bit about your case management in HMIS? I feel like I've been hogging it, so I want to let you do the
No, you were doing it. Well, this falls right in line with coordinated entry and system performance measures and all those things that we have been hearing for years and years and years coming out of HUD, whether you get COC funding or you get it through ESG or CDBG or whatever. All of those things all fall under the umbrella of case management. If we're assessing needs properly, making referrals and doing follow-ups properly, it's all case management. Well, HMIS and especially Client Track has the ability to fill all of those needs. Now, I'm probably no different than any other COC or any other community across the nation. We're probably using less than 15 to 20% of the capability of the software we have at our hands. And that's one of the things that I'm excited about is DESTA helping me push the envelope to how we can make things clearer, more user-friendly, more transparent, more useful for everybody, but so that we can truly make it a full range case management program to meet the needs of clients and communicate with our other community partners so that, we can see real progress going forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and it's really cool because one of the things that Pat and I talk about is how, and I think we've said this quite a bit on the call, is that your data's not, your people aren't in silos, so your data's not in silos. So there's a lot of social detriments of health that impact other areas, and one of the things that's really cool is when Pat and I talk about working on projects or making changes or look at our backlog items, we look at it from a larger perspective. So we're not just looking at it from a funding standpoint. We're not just looking at it from a data entry standpoint, and we're trying to get the data into the system so we can do reports. We look at it from the whole perspective. We look at the individual. What's it like to enter that data? Does this meet the reporting needs for this? Is there, a better way that we can get this data that we need? And then we follow all the way through to the end to the reporting. And it's this big picture idea of, having people and having these conversations where we talk about how we can better use the system for better functionality to make to meet people's needs better. And it's amazing what we can do when we have these conversations like this. Because a lot of the conversations are Pat saying, "Oh, I wish I could do that." I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, we can do that. Check this out."
Exactly.
And it's it's really awesome that we can do that and have these moments, and people are like, "Wow. We've been doing it this way for years. This saves us so much time." So it's really awesome, that we have quite a few moments like that.
And I just want to jump in real quick, Desta, because I just had a thought.
Mm-hmm.
One of our local shelters approached us 4 or 5 weeks ago and said, "Hey, I'm looking for some data for this time period compared to this time period." I knew it was in there, but I didn't know how to get it out. So it literally was a ticket to Desta saying, "Hey, listen, look at what they're asking for. Can you help me get it?" Bada boom, bada bing. A couple hours later, the data is there. I ran it for previous years that they didn't ask for, just so they would have a bigger comparison. As a result, they're going to be opening up a community case management program simply because they saw that that was a gap based on the data that they received. So and this is an agency who has not always been very supportive of data collection or inputting of data. They, quote unquote, didn't see the point. So now their decisions are being driven on data. That to me, I've sort of jumped up and down. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's a great example. Yeah, I really like that. That's really an awesome part of the job is just us having these conversations, and we're just able to find really awesome ways to help meet people's needs, and we continue to do that. Like that's a great example. But it's one of the things that we do on our calls and how we meet is that there's always this idea of further progression. How can we move this towards the future? How are we going to use this not only now but years from now? Just to make sure that we're staying ahead of the game, because HMIS is constantly changing. Not only our reporting practices but what's expected of us. And one of the things at the last NHSDC conference, for any of you that went, that was said was, HMIS person, what used to be the person that could fix the printer. And, that's not the case anymore. There's data science needs. There's all these skills and tool sets that are expected and needed of HMIS staff. And that's one of the things that, we're able to do is sort of help to bridge that gap and help meet that need.
But I think too, it's really important that the things that Desta's talking about, the information that comes at NHSDC Or, I
Mhm.
don't know if any of you remember for several years, HUD talked about coordinated entry and everything else. And for those of us that
Mhm.
went, they've talked about it 2 years in a row, possibly we should start putting some things in place. The next thing you know, it was a mandate, and here we are.
Mhm.
System performance measures, the same thing. Slowly through the years, funding applications, any kind of information became more data driven and less prose driven. So having someone who it's their number one and only responsibility to stay on top of that and to look for those trends and to look for those little hints, to make sure that you're prepared. I'm just thankful that's her, because I would be off in left field somewhere playing with the baseball, and so she can keep us on track and make sure it comes over the home plate.
So we have our fourth challenge. Pat, do you want to describe this, or do you want me to
You
bring us
go ahead
home
and
with it?
start, and I'll jump in because I'm sitting here shaking my head. Woohoo!
Okay. Some things still bring back feelings. I gotcha. Yeah. So our fourth challenge is one that was a bit interesting. So we had some client records that were merged together that did not need to be combined. And what ended up happening is it was basically just the client IDs were combined. So you had basically two client records that together one. And I total after all this end users it caused a lot of confusion because people were uncertain for a couple of different reasons of what happened. They were uncertain of how it could be fixed, or even be fixed. There was also question of, after that of, because in order to fix it, it involved going into security settings. So from the perspective, we were uncertain that they knew that things were going to be changing, but they didn't know how or what. So we ended up getting a lot of questions and tickets regarding security settings. And regarding, is this client record being shared? I don't think this client record should be shared, and I can't tell if it is or not, or if it appears to be. So we ended up, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of mistrust around this. But in order to work this out, we ended up having to do some really cool things to communicate our steps along the way. And it seems really simple, but the communication really helped along the process. So we ended up having to get another department involved. So EPS had to get involved with the fix. While I wouldn't always participate on the calls, that was something that Pat and I check in with on the weekly calls. So as Pat has her meetings with them, she gets on the call with me and checks. She has questions about things. So for instance, a perfect example was Pat was having to look up at a client record but couldn't find it. So she was able to email me and say, hey, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Can you help me? And we were able to work through what was going on there. We were also, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest thing about that was, well, one of the biggest things for me was that we had Desta as acting as a liaison between the APS folks who are literally, programming this line goes to this, and all the really, really techie, nitty gritty stuff, and the end user. Because the computer engineers are saying one thing, but the end user is hearing another, because we live in two different worlds. So having Desta to be that liaison, that bridge, that interpreter at times, was number one huge. But it was also the fact that she was an outside force, and a person who had no vested interest in anything other than the data. So she came with a level of respect and of no having no bias. that took what was really a very, very tense situation, because when everything is going well and there's no problems, everybody really likes each other. But when there's a problem, people start to get very territorial, feelings get hurt, tempers flare, and all those other things. She was able to go, okay, guys, it's down to this. It's down to taking client 1 and client 2 and looking at them and going, guess what? They are a match. They are the exact same. So they will become one. These 2, 3, and 4, they're not, so they won't. And just, it sounds very basic, but again, when you're dealing with all of the other things that come into what we do every day, mainly being people's feelings, having Desta to act as the buffer between all of that took it to where we are actually looking at making changes long-term in our security of the system and in how things are viewed and not viewed. We're going in a direction that we've wanted to go in for many years, and the end users who are now really rallying behind, yes, let's do this, were the same ones that for years had given the pushback of that's not possible. So it literally has been a 160 in that department, which for me just makes my life a whole lot easier.
No. And it's a lot of fun for me. I have a lot of fun with what I do, but it also allows us, like Pat was saying, is, when we're able to do these things, it allows us to increase trust and confidence among end users, because while that was a tense situation, for me, it was also a learning opportunity, because I had an opportunity where people were saying, I don't understand this. Can you please explain it? So, it really, a lot of these times we're just taking, a lot of this is, for us was taking the time with end users to answer their questions, to say, hey, I can see this. Why can I see record A and not record B when they look the same to me? And explaining those differences in a language that they can understand, that's palatable to their skill level, is something that we try to do a lot. And that's one of the things that Pat and I talk about, is how end users will relate and how we can meet end users' needs by using the system and by re-examining processes.
But also, I think too, Dustin, when you talked about a learning experience, but this also has uncovered for us the opportunity to go, oh, well, and feel okay about saying, well, I didn't know that, or I didn't know how to do that, or hey, did you know this? It opened up a whole new conversation, even with our most experienced users, that they felt comfortable in saying, possibly we need some education, but also how can we make this, how can we take this whole process to the next level?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's when they start asking questions, people start thinking and they start putting pieces together. And that's when we start getting some really good ideas. And we learn, we're increasing what we do. I don't think, that our plans when we started in November are not the plans that we've had now. We've grown and changed them to meet how we've been working together,
Right.
And with the things that we've uncovered.
And I think another thing is that you've been unique in that you've given the users the tools, the experience, and the direction and how to do it themselves. Now, there are some things that obviously and only administrator can do, but it's, well, how do I look at this, or how can I compare this to this? You said, okay, and I sat there and read the tickets. If you will go to such and such a screen and you will click here and you will click here and you will click there, you can look at this. But now if you change this, then you would see this. So the user feels empowered
Yeah, we're helping build the toolbox.
Exactly. That you said it. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Now we're helping them build the toolbox so they can take these skills and apply it to other areas.
Absolutely.
All right. And overall, though, I think that we've noticed through my interactions and working with end users, and working with Pat, is there's increased confidence and trust, not only with us but with the system. So there's questions of, well, this can't happen. It's, well, can this happen? So it's opened the possibility that the functions that they do aren't the only ones that they can do. So they can't just do an intake, or they can't just do one type of report. There's other stuff that they could do. There's also definitely increased trust. So we definitely seen responsiveness to when suggestions or ideas are offered among end users, but also more questions are being asked, which is a good sign, because that means that people are feeling comfortable to ask the questions, and that they're starting to examine what they know and feel comfortable enough with their HMIS team to start inquiring and to start taking those chances to be vulnerable and ask questions. Really awesome. We've also been able to be a lot more forward thinking. So as Pat and I were saying, our goals and our bucket list and our backlog items aren't the same that they were in November that they are now. We've grown and changed. We also we're avoiding being behind the 8 ball. So we're not waiting until the last minute to do data quality checks. We're not waiting to the last minute to submit reports. We're planning ahead of time. But we know that these things are coming down the pipeline, and we're able to make a plan for it. And because we make plans for those things, when we do find hiccups or we do have issues and challenges, they're not as serious, and we've recovered quicker, it seems, because we've already have these tools and these points of reference that we've had before. We're not relearning everything. We are we're taking what we know, seeing what works and moving forward.
Ditto.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add, Pat? Like, what do you think are like some results that you've seen in the community, or that you've noticed since November?
Well, I think we truly are building the confidence that not only is the data true, but also I know how to go get it. So if I have a question about it, and I'm speaking as an end user, if I have a question or a concern about some data or about the quality of my data, how do I check it? How do I not wait until the quarterly data quality reports come out from the COC? How do I stay on top of it on a regular basis, And one of the end users said, "Oh my gosh, my boss was so impressed when I showed her this, that I knew how to pull this, and that I was paying attention to it." It's those kinds of things. It's like, okay, we're not waiting to the report card to come out to find out that Johnny is failing. We're keeping an eye on it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever. Those are the kinds of things that make us here and feel good that the end users feel confident, they trust the data, and that they're looking to us say, okay, what are we going to do next? What's next on the agenda? Because they're really looking forward to really being more of a data driven, because we can truly compare apples to apples, and breaking down the silos and knowing that it's truly a community effort, and not everybody is an expert in everything. But I think we've seen from the perspective of our community, we have seen more of our local providers specialize and don't only do what they do well. And I think that's what we're doing here with having HMIS administration done by Dustin and Ecovia is we're letting the experts do what the experts do so the rest of us can do what we do.
Mm-hmm. That's a very great way to put it. Yeah. Just letting people flourish and using their tools and what they bring to the table to make communities better. I think that's a great way to say that. All right. So next up, this is pretty minor compared to our laundry list of things that we want to accomplish.
Right.
But, some of the few things that Pat and I have talked about is we're reevaluating our HMIS system, make sure it's ready for 2020 and beyond. We've already started talking about, we know that there are going to be data standards coming out in October 2019. So, we will start talking about that now and knowing that this is a big item that's going to be coming down our pipeline, and there's going to be stuff that goes along with that. So not only are we going to have technical upgrades to our systems, but we're going to have changes to data that end users report on. So there's going to be trainings and talks that we need to have with our community and information that we need to get out about that. We're also really wanting people to understand more about reports, and this is a need that's unique to our community. So that's one of the really cool things about admin services is that we really cater this to Columbus, and our next step and our next steps and our to-do list is very central to Columbus. And this isn't going to be what another community would work on. So teaching people how to report, that was something that the community has shown interest in and that we want to accommodate, is, teaching them how to do the report, showing them the effective ways of reporting. That way they're getting it from a trusted source, and we're using that to spread awareness and information about it. We're also developing our plans of falling in line with HUD's strategic plan. So we're looking at being a more data literate culture when that goes back into all the other steps that we're doing. So we're really wanting to increase transparency, increase understanding of why end users are entering data, the applications behind that, and how that looks in our data, and then in turn what we use with that. So this idea of increasing data literacy, of increasing culture performance, and having the strategic plan to really mature our data and creating a more robust HMIS system in general is really what we're hoping to do.
And if I could just touch on one thing, because you talked about earlier in the presentation about being forward-thinking and not waiting till the last minute to get things done. Well, when I'm looking at our first bullet point here about talking about our system being ready for 2020 and beyond, you say, oh yeah, we're planning that. No, we're actually having that first meeting 2 weeks from today. So with already some things that to be in effect by July 1. So this truly is, and that's wonderful from a number of perspectives. Number one, we have a little bit of time to do it, but also because I know that there's somebody working that plan. I can say, hey, the HMIS committee in consultation with the board and everything else has said these are the top 3 things that they're concerned about. Now, Desta, from your perspective, from what you're hearing from HUD, from all the other TAs, what you're reading in the journals, all this other stuff, are we going in the right direction? Are there things we need to drop off? There's things we need to add. How can we align what the board wants to see, what the community needs to hear or see, with where we need to be to meet all of our guidelines, and to take it so that we're not just doing and meeting the basic requirements, but that we're not just driving around in a bare bones vehicle, but we have a few of those little extra items that always make it more pleasurable to to go through. So that's really, really interesting that we are already looking at that, and it's not that we're just saying, oh yeah, it's coming. We really have a plan in place to make sure that we're ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's and that's one of the things that we really strive to is changing and upgrading, and anytime new information comes out, really examining our path and where we see ourselves within the next few years. Honestly, yeah, it's really fun. I don't know if Pat feels the same way, but I think we have a lot of fun in our conversations.
Yeah.
Planning for the future and making, changing how, looking at how things are going on, new issues and how to address it. It's a lot of fun. Next slide. All right. So, that's the end of what that Pat and I had. I did want to talk about some new admin services that Ecovia is going to be offering. So in the future, we are looking into doing an HMIS organizational maturity assessment. So this would be kind of how Pat and I talked about looking at examining the health of your organization and how, we've moved forward and created a plan to better ourselves. We're working on a maturity assessment that would help sort of assess communities of where they are, like where you would be maturity-wise, and how you could move forward. We're also looking at Data Matters, which is going to be a new program that's going to offer soft services around data science. So how do you build the soft services that you need to build your toolbox to be a successful admin? How do you do analytics? How do you break information down to teach it to communities? How do you help troubleshoot tickets and the data science and the skills you need to be a strong admin? And to have a strong HMIS community. And then we're also looking at a final one, which would be compliance matters, which would deal more with federal reporting, the data around that. So those would be the three services that we would be offering in the future as well. So I think that's all that I have. Thank you. And I'll give it back to Laurel. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Pat and Dustin, for your presentation. That was great. So we've had a couple of questions submitted. If anyone else has a question they would like to submit through the Q&A panel, please do so. So the first question we have is, are you currently using HMIS as a comprehensive case management tool?
Yes, but not to the extent that we have that the software has the capability. We're in the infancy stages of that, so yes. I hope that answers your question.
And it leads in great to the next one, that is, can you tell me more about how you want to use Client Track for a full range case management program?
Well, the biggest thing for me is to be able to meet the needs of the client in the easiest way possible. One example of what we instituted, it's been actually a couple of years ago now, was to make sure that documents are uploaded to the system so that the client doesn't have to present every time they go to a referral source for, a bus pass, or they're trying to help get their birth certificate or this, that, and the other. All of the documents that are related to that client, whether it be their ID, their social, their birth certificate, their lease, their verification of disability, income, those kinds of things are uploaded to the system, so that anyone who has the ability to see the data under the current sharing agreements, if with all of the safeguards in place, can be able to access that data and use it to help service the client in the most efficient, expeditious manner possible. That was huge for our clients, and to this day, if they get, as they call it, we got some more important papers in the mail, they'll bring it by office and say, hey, I want you to put it in your computer in case somebody else needs it. So that has become that was step one in making sure that we did it. And going forward, we would like to be able to make sure that everyone used case notes every time they did an encounter with a client. So much can be learned about what's going on with a client, some needs, and referrals can be made based on those case notes if everyone used them to make sure that we documented contact with the client, and then needs and or accomplishments. You know, the client got a job, well, then you would note that, but that also could trigger, you know, a follow-up evaluation for a financial assessment, which could in turn benefit your system performance measures in the end. So those are just two of the ways I think that using it in a case management role can be hugely successful for the client and the community as a whole.
Great, thank you. So next question. Pat, can you elaborate a little on the organization that decided to do case management because of the data you sent them?
I can. Again, it's a current shelter who has had lower than optimal usage over the past. I said I've been here for 3 years, and I've been talking about it for 3 years. We're talking less than 35% usage on any given night, even the coldest nights of the year. So one of the evaluations they did from a national, and this is a national agency who has a facility here in Columbus, they started asking some questions because the local director was saying, hey guys, we have to do something different. We're not meeting the community's needs. And so they asked for some quote unquote unbiased data. And they're not a funded agency, but they do graciously participate in HMIS. So we were seen as an unbiased agency that could provide them their usage rates. And that was the final decision that they used to make to switch their current facility from a male shelter to a one that focuses on families.
To meet the needs of the community at the time?
That's correct.
That's great. No, it's always cool to see when the data can have an impact like that.
Yes.
Making a data-informed decision. Yeah.
All right. Well, those are all the questions we have for today. So, again, I want to thank Pat and Desta for their great presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will be sending out the webinar recording by the end of this week. Also, if you have any questions and would like to learn more about the administrator services, please reach out to your account manager. You can also reach out to Desta. I guarantee she'd be happy to answer some of your questions as well. So, yeah, so thanks, everyone, and have a great day.